الحمد لله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وجعل الظلمات والنور ثم الذين كفروا بربهم يعدلون. الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله لقد جاءت رسل ربنا بالحق. جزاكم الله خيرا. Okay, so we're at class 22. Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sister Nakira and everyone else. We're at class 22 and we've reached the ayah that, and this is from the Balagha of the Quran, that Allah Ta'ala talked about the result of the behavior and excessive questioning of Bani Israel. And after he went into the detail of the result of that, he mentioned the reason for it. If we make tadabbur of the Quran, قال موسى لقومه إن الله يأمركم أن تذبحوا بقرة. And then Musa said to his people, indeed Allah Ta'ala has ordered you to slaughter a cow. قالوا أتتخذنا هزوا. They said, are you making a mockery of us? قال أعوذ بالله أن أكون من الجاهلين. He said, I seek refuge in Allah that I should be from the ignorant. قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما هي. He said, ask your Lord to explain to us what is it, what kind of cow it is. قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة لا فارد ولا بكر عوان بين ذلك فافعلوا ما تؤمرون. He said, indeed, he says it should be a cow that is neither old and out of use, nor young that has never been in use before, but rather between those two extremities, those two ages. Now do what you've been ordered. قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما لونها. They said, call on your Lord and ask your Lord to explain to us what is the color of the cow. قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة صفراء فاقع لونها تسر الناظرين. My Lord says that it should be a cow that is a bright golden yellow, that anyone that sees it is impressed by it. قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما هي إن البقرة تشابه علينا وإنا إن شاء الله لمهتدون. They said, call on your Lord and ask us exactly what cow should it be, because all cows look alike to us. And if you do this, then inshallah we'll be guided. قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة لا ذلول تثير الأرض ولا تسقي الحرث مسلمة لا شية فيها. قالوا الآن جئت بالحق فذبحوها وما كادوا يفعلون. He said, indeed, my Lord says that it should be a cow that has not been used to plow the land, nor to use to water the fields, to irrigate the land, without any blemish on it. They said, now you have brought the truth, as if he was lying in the beginning. فَذَبَحُوهَا. So they slaughtered it, and they really were not going to do it. So this is the result of that excessive question. Then Allah said, وَإِذْ قَتَلْتُمْ نَفْسًا فَادَّارَأْتُمْ فِيهَا. And when you killed someone and then argued about it. وَاللَّهُ مُخْرِجٌ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْتُمُونَ. But Allah is going to expose that which you were trying to hide. So this is the beginning of the story. The beginning of the story is that somebody was killed. And they disagreed on who was killed. They were going to have a civil war. They were going to fight each other about who was killed. So Allah Ta'ala mentioned the result of their behavior and then mentioned the reason later on. And this is, if we use this, is very important when it comes to social psychology. Especially if the Muslims were to use this when it comes to understanding crime. Because we have a Sharia that deals with crime. So from the ways of investigation is to deal with the results of the behavior of the people after the crime before dealing with the actual crime that took place. So Allah Ta'ala here in Surah Al-Baqarah He talked about the result of the behavior of the people after the crime took place and everything that they did and all of the tricks and schemes they were doing to avoid it and the excessive questioning after they came to Musa alayhi salam. And as another example of this is in Surah Yusuf. In Surah Yusuf. Inshallah, we get to that, we'll delve into that. But this Quran, Allah Ta'ala said in Surah Al-An'am, مَا فَرَّطْنَا فِي الْكِتَابِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. We have left nothing out of the book. So we look at that, Allah Ta'ala mentioned the result. When Musa said, your Lord ordered you to slaughter a cow, that was the result of them coming to him. They asked all of those questions. The reason all of that began is because of the young man from Bani Israel who killed his uncle in order to inherit from him. And the whole point of the slaughtering of the cow, this is from the balagha of the Quran, the eloquence of the Quran. The whole point of slaughtering the cow is for them to make a sacrifice for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then take a part of that cow and touch the dead body with it. And then at that point, Allah brought life to that dead man. And all he was only alive long enough to say, my nephew killed me. And we talked about when the story began, the greed of the nephew, the impatience and the greed. And this is why we have that what? In our Sharia, that the murderer of the person cannot inherit the person. And the kuffar adopted that from Islam. If someone kills a person, then they automatically lose right to inheritance. No. So Allah Ta'ala said, وَإِذْ قَتَلْتُمْ نَفْسًا فَادَّارَأْتُمْ فِيهَا وَاللَّهُ مُخْرِجٌ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْتُمُونَ. And Allah Ta'ala is going to expose what you were hiding. فَقُلْ نَضْرِبُوهُ بِبَعْضِهَا كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْمَوْتَى وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Allah Ta'ala said, when you killed a man and then argued about it, but Allah was going to expose that which you were hiding. So we said, after slaughtering of the cow, touch the body with a part of that slaughtered cow. And in that way, Allah Ta'ala will give life to the dead and show you his eyes. Perhaps you will have intellect. Show you his signs, his ayat. His signs, perhaps you will have intellect. So all of these, when Allah Ta'ala said, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, after any ayat, these are ayat in which we are supposed to ponder. We don't read it like that, like we're reading a newspaper or a novel or a comic book. We read it in order to sharpen our intellect and our understanding and comprehension of our affairs. These are social incidents. And when we need as Muslims to bring out all of this knowledge and information that's in the Quran, so that number one, the world will see that Islam is the answer. The world would see. But we have to tell them that Islam is the answer. We keep telling them they have the answer. And we have practiced the separation of church from state because we keep Islam within the confines of the masajid. And we don't show the people that Islam applies to every aspect of life. This is one of the aspects of crime investigation and criminal psychology, along with social psychology, if we were to ponder. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Perhaps you will understand. Perhaps you will have intellect. Anytime you see Allah mention intellect, then know for a fact you need to go back and ponder over those verses. Then Allah Ta'ala said, Afwan. So the ulama said with regard to this, وَاذْكُرُوا حِينَ قَتَلْتُمْ وَاحِدًا مِنْكُمْ فَتَدَافَعْتُمْ. So remember that time when you killed an individual from amongst you, and then you began arguing, disputing, تَدَافَعْتُمْ. كل يدفع عن نفسه تهمة القتل. Everyone is defending himself from the accusation of murder. ويرمي بها غيره. And then he would throw the accusation at someone else. حتى تنازعتم, to the point that you argue and differed and separated. والله مخرج ما كنتم تخفون. But Allah Ta'ala is going to expose that which you were hiding, min qatli dhalika al-bari, from killing that innocent individual. فَقُلْنَا لَكُمْ اضْرُبُوا الْقَتِيلَ بِجُزْءٍ مِنَ الْبَقَرَةِ الَّتِي أُمِرْتُمْ بِذَبْحِهَا. So we said to you, strike the murder victim with a piece of the cow that you were ordered to slaughter. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ سَيُحْيِيهِ لِيُخْبِرْ مَنْ الْقَاتِلِ, because indeed Allah is going to give him life in order to inform who the murderer was. فَفَعَلُوا ذَلِكَ فَأَخْبَرَ بِقَاتِلِهِ. And so they did that, and he informed who his murderer was. وَمَثَلُ إِحْيَاءِ هَذَا الْمَيِّتِ يحيي الله الموتى يوم القيامة ويريكم دلائل البينة على قدراته لعلكم تعقلونها فتؤمنون حقا بالله تعالى. And the example of Allah giving life to this dead individual, Allah will give, or like Allah Ta'ala gave life to this dead individual, Allah will give life to the dead on the day of judgment. And he, by this, shows you the evidence, the clear evidences of his power. Perhaps that you would understand that and then believe in him a correct belief in Allah Ta'ala. Or perhaps you will believe correct and true belief in Allah Ta'ala, the Most High. Then Allah Ta'ala said, ثُمَّ قَصَتْ قُلُوبُكُم مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ فهي كالحجارة أو أشد قسوة. Allah said, and then your hearts became hard after that. So they became like stones, or even more severe in their harshness. وَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ لَمَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ. Because indeed there are stones that rivers burst through them. وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَشَّقَّقُ فَيَخْرُجُ مِنْهُ الْمَاءُ. And from them, those stones, are those that holes burst through and springs shoot through those stones. وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَهْبِطُ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. And from those stones are those that if you were to put them in the body of water, or even if they're on top of other rocks, they fall down, they tumble. We look at it as a rock slide. We just look at it as a rock sinking. This rock is doing this based on khashya, fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, humbling itself before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah said in Surah Al-Hashr, لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون. Allah said, if we were to send down this Quran on a mountain, you would see it break and crumble out of fear of Allah. And these are the examples or parables we put forth to the mankind. Perhaps they would think. So this is the khashya of the stones. Whereas the human can hear the ayat of Allah from Al-Fatiha to Nas, and then again from Nas to Al-Fatiha, and not have his heart affected by that. Tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, still not be affected. Tsunamis, wildfires, still not be affected. The spread of murder, rape, robbery, kidnapping, still not be affected. How many signs of the hour are we going to have to see? Do we like to just count them, or are they going to actually affect our behavior and our istiqamah on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Then Allah Ta'ala told the Muslims about those arrogant, rebellious, obstinate kuffar from the Jews, as they are attacking the Muslims now in Palestine. And when my wife asked me, did you hear about it? She sent me a message. Did you hear what's going on in Palestine? I said, I heard something about it, but I don't understand what's the difference of what's been going on since 1946. or 42. It was 42 or 46. This has been going. May Allah Ta'ala give victory to the Muslims over the enemies of Allah and Islam. Ameen. Wallahu al-musta'an. So Allah Ta'ala said about these Jews, hypocritical Jews, evil Jews, أَفَتَطْمَعُونَ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا لَكُمْ وَقَدْ كَانَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ يَسْمَعُونَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ يُحَرِّفُونَهُ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا عَقَلُوهُ وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. Allah said, do you really have hopes? الطمع is like to have a really fervent hope, a greedy type hope. It's not the best translation for طمع either also. أَفَتَطْمَعُونَ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا لَكُمْ. Do you really have hope that they're going to believe in what you're calling them to? وَقَدْ كَانَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ يَسْمَعُونَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ. When there was a group from amongst them that heard the words of Allah, the speech of Allah, unadulterated, the real speech of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala wrote the Torah with his hand. Allah wrote the Torah with his hand. One of the things of creation that Allah touched with his hand. ثُمَّ يُحَرِّفُونَهُ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا عَقَلُوهُ. They heard the speech of Allah, a group of them heard the speech of Allah, and then they distorted it after they understood it. And then they distorted, and this goes for every sheikh, every alim, every imam, da'i, muallim, ustad in Islam. That the sin is the same. That if a person distorts the words of Allah, be it in writing, or be it in distortion of the meaning. It's like in 2017 or 2018. I'm trying to think. Maybe in 2017. A group of hypocrites, major hypocrites, from the University of Al-Azhar in Egypt. They went to France. And the French government, and the meeting was leaked. The French government, I watched the whole thing. The French government was asking them, what can you do with the Quran? We need the Quran to be changed in order for the Muslims to be more docile. So those hypocrites, they said, and I'm going to review or ask my wife to send me, because I would name them. I want to name them, inshallah ta'ala, if I can find their names. If I can find the meeting. So those hypocrites, but one of them, his name was Mizo, Sheikh Mizo. Now, those hypocrites were sitting there with the French government, and they said, we cannot change the Quran. The Quran can't be changed. But what we can do is change this interpretation. So what we can start doing, they agree, what they're going to start doing is that all of the surah, the chapters that were revealed in Medina, because this is what they're worried about, those Medina surahs that's telling the Muslims to stand up and that the Muslims are supposed to be the uppermost. They said we can say about those chapters that were revealed in Medina that they cannot be implemented unless the Prophet ﷺ is alive. Other than that, they can't be implemented. Now, this is what those hypocrites said. I believe 2017 and 2018. And one from them is one Sheikh Mizu from Azhar University. So Allah Ta'ala says here, and from them are those who changed, and just like these individuals who are saying that it's calling on other than Allah, making dua to other than Allah is not shirk. That individual in Texas, calling on other than Allah is not shirk. That you can make dua to other than Allah and it's not shirk. The same as the individual that said that Tafseer Ibn Kathir is medieval Tafseer. The same individual that said the Ya'juj and Ma'juj is with folklore. That there's so much archaeological discoveries, it's hard to believe. He's talking about the Quran. It's hard to believe that there's a group of people hidden behind a wall and nobody's discovered them yet. And much more from the evil kufr of this individual. And I'll eventually name him. Now, so Allah Ta'ala said, so every Muslim clergyman that does this with the book of Allah, distorts it after knowing what it means, then he's like a Jew. He's like a Jew. Because they want to stray upon knowledge. And it's from those who they heard the speech of Allah and then they distorted it while knowing what it meant. من بعد ما أكلوه وهم يعلمون, and they know that. وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا, and if they meet with those who believe, they say we believe. وإذا خلا بعضهم إلى بعض قالوا أتحدثونهم بما فتح الله عليكم ليحاجوكم به عند ربكم أفلا تعقلون. So when they meet those who believe, they say we believe. And then when they're alone with one another, what do they say? Are you really going to tell them what Allah sent down in the Torah so they can use it as an argument against you in front of your Lord? Do you not have any sense? So they are ones who intentionally hide information of revelation. They intentionally distort it. They distort it with their pens and with their tongues. And every Muslim clergyman, imam, caller, who manipulates the text of Quran and Sunnah, because just like those hypocrites said to the French government, they know they can't change Quran and Sunnah. They can't change the Quran, they can't change the Sunnah. But they can manipulate the meaning of it. And this is why it's so important to seek ilm. Because if a person understands the text, as Ali radiallahu anhu said, Al-haq la yu'raf bil-rijal, walakin al-rijal yu'rafuna bil-haq. He said the truth is not known by the men, but rather the men are known by the truth. So if you know the truth, you know which people are. But if you have begun to practice Islam in a fanatical manner, meaning attaching yourself to personalities, and those personalities that can get it right and get it wrong, and manipulate the text in order to serve personal agendas, then you'll be like a ping pong ball on the ping pong table between four players. Whoever has the best swing, that's the one that's going to direct you in the direction he wants you to go. But if you know what the truth is, by reading the Quran constantly, have a schedule for reading the Quran, try to at least complete the Quran once a year. I didn't say once a month, at least once a year. Grab a book of the Sunnah, Al-Bukhari, Muslim, read through them, translation, whatever you have, whatever your ability is, read through them and be familiar with it. So that when you hear someone speaking, you know the difference between someone who is speaking from their desires and someone who is speaking from the text of the book and the Sunnah. And then when you have those explanations by trustworthy scholars and callers available, then you read those explanations. And if you have the numbers or the relationship with someone upon the Sunnah of knowledge, then you reach out to them and call them about those things that may be confusing or you don't understand or you need some more detail. This is how you protect your deen. Look at the people of the dunya, how dedicated they are, and their mentors and what do they call them? Speakers, inspirational speakers. And look at how many followers they have. Look how many followers they have. As if what the people are going to amass in the dunya is greater than the reward of Jannah. Not one of them, except that he believes he's going to die one day. And even with that being the case, he strives very hard and she strives very hard to establish her dunya. And even no matter how many times they fail, they continue to fight for their dunya. So now we say we believe in Jannah. What are we doing to earn it? What are we doing to get there? So these are behavior patterns that Allah Ta'ala is warning us from having. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited withholding knowledge without a necessity. Allah Ta'ala prohibited manipulating information for it to be believed that it carries other than the message that Allah Ta'ala sent down. As we go through Tafseer, we're going to run into the story of Bani Israel. Exactly what we read here, partially, in different chapters of Quran. Allah Ta'ala is not redundant. Allah said, Kitab al-Mutashabih al-Mathani. Allah said He sent down a book that resembles itself and resembles itself. The verses resembles the other verses, and it repeats itself. So this is what we have to understand. This repetition, and we're going to come to across it again. And it's amazing that if you begin quoting these verses and focusing on them, the people say, why is he saying the same thing? He already talked about that. SubhanAllah. And this you can tell this is a person that doesn't read the Quran. When you take a topic in the Quran that's been repeated, so you begin explaining those verses and bringing out the benefits of the repetition and looking at the different benefits and points of view that can be taken from each time the story has been told with more detail or less detail, or focusing on this particular detail of the incident and like that, the people say, oh, you said that already, or you're repeating this stuff, so you can't be reading the Quran. Because so what do you say when you read the Quran and you find the story over and over again? Do you say, well, is Allah repeating himself? It's amazing. So we have to have a relationship with the Quran, and it's only through you cannot not have a relationship with the Quran and claim you have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Stop lying to yourself. Stop lying to yourself. Don't think that you abandon the book of Allah in which He sent down guidance, a cure, an instruction. You don't have a relationship with His book, but you believe you have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Impossible. Impossible. Don't lie to yourself. You want a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, read the Quran. Because this is how He speaks to you, subhanahu. Nobody's receiving revelation. So these are the verses that we wanted to bring today. We finished page 11, the next page 12. Afwan, I didn't read the benefits. Almost skipped. So the ulama say about these ayahs, ثُمَّ قَصَتْ قُلُوبُكُم مِّن بَعْدِ هَذِهِ الْمَوَاعِظِ الْبَلِيغَةِ وَالْمُعْجِزَاتِ الْبَاهِرَةِ. And then your hearts became hard after these stern admonishments and these amazing miracles. حَتَّى صَارَتْ مِثْلَ الْحِجَارَةِ, to the point your hearts became like stones. بَلْ أَشَدُّ صَلَابَةً مِنْهَا. No, they are even more hard than that. فَهِيَ لَا تَتَحَوَّلْ عَنْ حَالِهَا أَبَدًا. Because those hearts do not change from their situation ever. أَمَّا الْحِجَارَةِ فَتَتَغَيَّرْ وَتَتَحَوَّلْ. And as for stones, then they change. Then they change. They can change. فَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ مَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ. Because from the stones are that which rivers burst through. وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَتَشَقَّقْ فَيَخْرُجُ مِنْهُ الْمَاءُ يَنَابِعْ جَارِيَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And from them are those that split and water bursts through them, يَنَابِعْ, so they become springs running across the face of the earth. وَيَنْتَفِعُ بِهَا النَّاسِ وَالدَّوَابِ. And so people benefit from them, and even animals. وَمِنْهَا مَا يَسْقُطْ مِنْ أَعَالِي الْجِبَالِ خَشْيَةً مِنَ اللَّهِ وَرَهْبَةً. And from them are that which comes down from the highest part of the mountains, out of fear of Allah Ta'ala, in reverence for Allah. وَلَيْسَتْ كَذَلِكَ قُلُوبُكُمْ, and your hearts are not like that. وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ, and Allah Ta'ala is not heedless of what you do. بَلْ هُوَ عَالِمٌ بِهِ وَسَيُجَازِيكُمْ عَلَيْهِ, rather he is all-knowing of that, and he will recompense you according to that. أَفَتَرْجُونَ أَيُّهَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, do you really hope, O you believers, بعد أن علمتم حقيقة حال اليهود وعناد أن يؤمنوا, do you really hope, O you believers, after you have known the reality of the situation of the Jews, in their obstinance, that they're going to believe? وَيَسْتَجِيبُ لَكُمْ, and answer your call. وَقَدْ كَانَ جَمَاعَةٌ مِنْ عُلَمَائِهِمْ يَسْمَعُونَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ الْمُنَزَّلِ عَلَيْهِمْ فِي التَّوْرَاةِ, when there was a group amongst them from their scholars who used to hear the words of Allah that was sent down upon them in the Torah. ثُمَّ يُغَيِّرُونَ أَلْفَاظَهَا وَمَعَانِيَهَا بَعْدَ فَهْمِهِمْ لَهَا وَمَعْرِفَتِهِمْ بِهَا, after they knew and understood what it meant. وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ إِذْمَ جَرِيمَتِهِمْ, and they knew that this was a major sin. They knew it. من تناقضات اليهود مكرهم أنهم إذا لقي بعض المؤمنين اعترفوا لهم بصدق النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said, and from the contradictions of the Jews in their plots is that from them are those, so a group of those that when they meet with the believers, they acknowledge the truthfulness of the prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam وصحة رسالته, and the correctness of his message. وهو ما تشهد له التوراة, and he is the one that the Torah is speaking about coming after Musa. ولكن حين يخلو اليهود بعضهم ببعض يتلاومون فيما بينهم بسبب هذه الاعترافات. But when their Jews are alone with one another, they blame one another. Those who admit and acknowledge the truthfulness of the Prophet Muhammad, they begin blaming each other that they shouldn't have done so. لأن المسلمين يقيمون عليهم بها الحجة, because the Muslims, with the statements of those Jews who acknowledge that the Prophet Muhammad was true and he was mentioned in the Torah, the Muslims will use this as evidence against those who wanted to deny that. فيما صدر عنهم من الاعتراف بصدق النبوة, from that which came from them from acknowledging the truthfulness of the prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So then the ulama bring three benefits. من فوائد الآيات, from the benefits of these verses, أن بعض قلوب العباد أشد قسوة من الحجارة الصلبة, that some of the hearts of the slaves of Allah are harder than granite rock. فلا تلين لموعظة, so they are not affected by being admonished. ولا ترقي لذكرى, nor do they become soft by hearing the reminder. Number two, أن الدلائل والبينات وإن عظمت لا تنفع إن لم يكن القلب مستسلما خاشعا لله, that evidence and proofs, no matter how great they were, they bring no benefit if the heart was not submissive and fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third benefit, كشفت الآيات حقيقة ما انطوت عليه أنفس اليهود. These verses expose that what the desires, the secret, real desires of the Jews are. حيث توارثوا الرعونة والخداع وتلاعب بالدين, because they have inherited and the legacy they have passed on is deception and deceit and playing with religion. Now, that's the third thing. So this is what we wanted to mention for today. That's the end of page 11. Next is page 12. And we're going to continue as we go through Tafseer. This is going to be over and over again mentioned. Wallahu musta'an. So if there are any statements or questions concerning what was covered, we'll take that now. If not, we'll stop here. طيب. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام عليكم.
السلام